My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Okay guys, so today we are doing a video I do, I guess, 4 times a year, which is that I am ranking all of the ARCs that I have received from publishers from Q1 through Q3. So these are books that were published or going to be published between January and September of 2020. ARC means Advanced Reader's Copy, and basically this is a copy of a book, either electronic or physical, that publishers give to reviewers so that they can like build hype and review before the book comes out. And as a part of me trying to be a good steward of getting access to those copies, I do try to just check in once a quarter about my overall ranking of the ARC copies that I have received for that quarter. So we are updating to include all of the Q3 books I've read. Now guys, I now, for just Q1 through Q3, I have officially read 43 ARCs, so that is a lot of books, and just for Q3, I have 18 books. So, what I'm gonna do, I am gonna rank them all, but I am not going to give like a full review except for the new ones. Also, there's my cat. I'm not gonna give full reviews except for the new ones because that we would be here forever, basically. We're only gonna talk about the new ones, and that is 18 of them. So, you know, no more dilly-dallying. Let's just get into this because we got a lot of ground to cover. Number 43, the bottom of the list, and a new one to this list, is The Wrong Mr. Darcy by Evelyn Lozada, and I unfortunately gave this only 1 star. I did finish it, but I basically did not find anything to recommend this. This is supposed to be a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but with a few twists. Our heroine is a sports reporter, the Mr. Darcy character is a basketball star, and I just think that there's a number of problems with this book on a writing level, on a character level. Some of the racial tropes that were used for the biracial main character bothered me, and this is, in my opinion, not meaningfully actually a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, which is, I think, a problem based on the titling and marketing. So unfortunately, it is one I cannot recommend. Other people may have different experiences, but that was mine. 42 is Mr. Malcolm's List by Suzanne Allain. I gave this one 2.5 stars, and really, this read kind of like historical romance fan fiction, but not in a way that I found pleasant, enjoyable, interesting. Cat is trying to chew my tripod. This is a problem. Honey, I need you to get out of here. It fell pretty flat to me. Like, the setup is that this guy, Mr. Malcolm, is like a very desirable, very Mr. Darcy-esque kind of character who has like a list of what things he thinks makes a good lady or like a worthy wife. And one of the women who he has sort of scorned or had her hopes dashed by him sets out to set up this other woman to like make him fall in love and then like pull the wool out from under him. And then, you know, I bet you can guess where things go from there. Not terrible, but I just thought noticeably not one of the better things I've read. So that's kind of why it's so far down. Not my favorite. Then we've got 41, which is Real Men Knit by Kwana Jackson, which is contemporary romance. 40 is A Taste of Sage by Yaffa Santos, which is also somewhere between contemporary romance and women's fiction, something kind of like that. 39 is Hearts on Hold by Charish Reid, which is contemporary romance set at a college between a professor and then a local children's librarian. And then 38 is The Silence of the White City by Eva Garcia Senez. And this is what I would probably describe as it's like a Dan Brown action-adventure mystery kind of thing. It was originally published in Spanish and it's been a big bestseller there. This is the English translation, and I should mention it's the first of a trilogy. And I would say I found I'm gonna assume it's the translation, though I have had some Spanish-speaking readers let me know that they think this is also true in the original. But in the translation, at least, I think the writing is quite choppy. It is still very bingeable, but because of the quality of the writing, I couldn't get fully immersed in it. But basically, there's like a serial killer who was put away years and years ago, and now they're finding new bodies that are killed in the same sort of ritualistic style as the original killer. And it's sort of a race against the clock to try to prevent him from striking again. So yeah, it has a lot of that kind of Dan Brown pacing to it in terms of an action adventure. You're going around like this Spanish city, which is really fun in terms of sort of like armchair travel. Like there's things to like about this book. I think that the writing kept me from loving it the way that I hoped I might. So I would want people to be aware of that before they go into the book, but it was, you know, like a fun time, a nice sort of like page turner action adventure mystery thing. 37 is The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren, which is one of those ones that sort of straddles the line between contemporary romance and women's fiction. Kind of a hate to love, kind of a workplace romance thing, so. 36 is The Stars We Steal by Alexa Dunn, and this is YA sci-fi that is a retelling of Persuasion. And then 35 is The Best Man Plan by J.C. Burton. Now, this is a contemporary romance. I gave this 3.5 stars. I'm tempted, and I may in my final ranking need to revisit this and bump it down a little bit because I am struggling to really remember what happens in this book because I read this, I think maybe back in like May. I think that I remember now. Yeah, this is like a contemporary romance that it's not like a major innovation. It's not like this is something crazy different or new, but J.C. Burton, I think, is a really nice stylist of contemporary romance. Like she gets how the plots work. She has a nice quality to her writing, I think, that always make them feel a little special compared to just like, you know, if you were gonna grab a contemporary romance out of the box. Like I think she always has a little extra something in her writing. And the setup for this one is a woman who gets left at the altar like a week before the wedding is gonna happen. And as a part of her kind of like processing or getting over that, she ends up having what she thinks is gonna be sort of a fling with the best man, but the best man has always had a thing for her. And he's like, I'm gonna use this kind of foot in the door to get in with you. And love blooms from there. So it's totally fun, totally fine. I don't know that it's super memorable, but if you're looking for like a contemporary romance with those tropes, I think this will get the job done for you. 34 is The Island Affair by Priscilla Oliveras, and this is a contemporary romance fake dating trope set in Key West. That was fun. 33 is The Orphan of Cemetery Hill by Hester Fox. So Hester Fox writes these gothic historical romances that also have a very strong mystery component, and I tend to read them as historical mysteries with a strong romance element rather than a straight up romance. So that would be kind of how I would conceptualize this, is these tend to be historical mysteries, but also there's going to be some love story happening. I think the elements of this one are really good. So the first two that she wrote, I really enjoyed. I think I gave both of those 4 stars, and I like them about the same. I do think that this third one is the weakest of the 3 so far. That doesn't mean it's bad. The problem is the romance in this because the main male lead is so unlikable. The setup is that our heroine is the titular orphan of Cemetery Hill. She has an occult ability. She is able to talk to the recently departed, and she is living in like 1800s, 1850s, I think, outside of Boston, and her relatives her aunt and uncle are like horrible, and they've been exploiting her and her sister using this ability. They run away, and her sister essentially like abandons her kind of for her own good. That's the thought anyway. She ends up at the cemetery where she forms this like adopted father relationship with the guy who runs it. There's some shenanigans with grave robbers. There is a murder that the main male lead is suspected of and she gets involved with. Like there's a lot of elements to this I enjoyed. I really enjoyed the family dynamics between her and her sister, and then her and her adopted father. Like I thought a lot of the character stuff and the setting, which is where Hester Fox shines. I think her settings are always super evocative, and that is all still here in this book. I just think that the romance piece of it was too much in there for how bad it was. It's definitely the weakest of the 3. That said, I will still be looking for the Hester Fox ooky spooky light historical mystery that comes out this time every year, because I just really like the way she evokes that setting. So that was 33, and I wish it was higher, but still good. 3.5 stars, like not bad, just not as good as the 2 previous to it. 32 is Hidden from Laura Griffin, and if you are a reader of Laura Griffin, I can just tell you this is the start in a new series that is very Laura Griffin-y. Like it is a lot of the same vibe, a lot of the same kind of police procedural with a strong splash of romance. If The Orphan of Cemetery Hill is, in my mind, really historical mystery with a strong romantic element. Hidden is a contemporary mystery, police procedural with a strong romantic element. I really like the way Laura Griffin does those kinds of books. It's a variant of romantic suspense. And this one I think is a good, I can't tell you the trope it's playing with because you should find that out for yourself, but I think it's a good version of that. And if you know you like Laura Griffin and you like the kind of books she writes, I think that you're going to be happy with this one. If you've never read her before, this is the beginning of a new series, so you could jump in with this one. I personally really like her Tracers series, so I might tell you to start with that. I think Touch of Red in the Tracers series, I think, is a really good one. So I really like her. If you like Laura Griffin, you're going to like this one too. And then 31 is Who's That Earl by Susanna Craig. And I thought that this one was really, it had a lot of promise. And this is one that I think could have benefited from being slightly less of a romance and slightly more of a suspense book, which is what I kind of thought it might be. So basically, it's an unusual setup. So it's set in the Scottish Highlands, as romances are wont to be, in an old rundown castle where this woman who is writing under a pen name of all these Gothic romances, she's rich and she's sort of living out her life there, ostensibly as a widow, but actually she was never widowed. And her long lost love comes back because of his connection to this castle, and she has a stalker and they have to like overcome that and find their way together. I thought this was really charming. I would definitely read more from this author. Like I said, I think plot-wise this would have been stronger if there had been a little more suspense thrown in, but I still thought this was like really cute, really fun, like a very enjoyable and slightly different flavor of historical romance. Number 30 is Love Hard from Nalini Singh, which is a contemporary romance rugby book / childhood friends rediscovering each other in their adult life getting together. 29 is Upright Women Wanted from Sarah Galley. Can you feel that? The kitty is now grooming himself against the tripod. He doesn't want you guys to get this video today. Is that right, sweetie? I would describe as Western dystopia with like a heavy queer gendered metaphor going on in it, which was very interesting. 28 was Matzo Ball Surprise by Laura Brown, which is a fake relationship home for the holidays contemporary romance. And then 27 is Deal with the Devil by Kit Rocha. Now, this is one that I was intrigued to read. The setup, when I tell you, is alone intriguing to me, but specifically it was sort of being sold as for people who like Kate Daniels, which, if you guys know, Ilona Andrews is my very favorite currently writing author. That analogy really intrigued me. And I know of Kit Rocha, like I follow them on social media stuff, but I've never actually read any of their stuff. It's a writing duo. And I thought that this was really interesting. I think that some of the pacing in this one was a little off. So the setup is, it is a near future dystopia Atlanta, and they're basically what caused the dystopia was like a solar flare that totally destroyed the US's power infrastructure. And one of the things that has resulted from that is that information in terms of like books, but specifically like digital information, became incredibly hard to come by. And so our main character, our female main character, is a part of a trio of renegade librarians who basically like barter for information. And they also came out of this specific government program that gave them all of these kind of intense abilities. The main male lead is a part of another like squad who also defected from the government, and he has to lure her into a trap using some Library of Congress databases as the lure, and they both kind of know what's going on, so like it's a little bit cat and mouse and watching them come together. So I thought that this was really fun. I would recommend this. I just would say I do think that the action pieces of it aren't as satisfying as what Ilona Andrews is able to do to my taste, and for that reason it just made me appreciate what Ilona Andrews is able to do, because I think that writing effective action sequences is definitely a skill. And not that this is terrible, but I did think that threw off the pacing at times. So it was an interesting book, and I may continue in that series, but it's definitely worth trying if you like Ilona Andrews, to see if this is another kind of urban fantasy romance type series that you might enjoy. 26 is Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier, which I would describe as a domestic thriller for the most part, and the trope is missing child. Number 26 And then 25 is The Darkest Evening by Anne Cleeves. Now, Anne Cleeves is an author that I have been meaning to try, a mystery author who I hadn't quite gotten to yet. But I actually really ended up enjoying this. This is the 9th book in a series, the Vera Stanhope series, which is kind of a long-running detective procedural kind of thing she has going. And it's a very cozy version of a police procedural. It's in like small town Britain. And I picked this one up because it read like it was going to be an isolated closed circle mystery, which if you watch this channel, you know is my jam. And I don't think it really is quite that. The isolated, like everyone snowed in together, which is kind of what I thought it was going to be, really doesn't last for very long in the book. So that's not kind of the dominant flavor of what's going on in this one. But it does have that kind of coziness that an isolated closed circle mystery where everyone snowed in together has, in terms of it is still a small town. There is still a pretty limited number of suspects. Our main character, who is the main character in the series, Vera Stanhope, is driving home one night. She sees a car abandoned on the side of the road and there's a baby in the back seat, and she immediately is like, oh, what's going on? She goes to the local like grand house of the area, which she has some tangential, like she's a relative sort of, but kind of like a black sheep type thing, and tries to find like who left this baby in this car. And quickly a body is found as people are kind of trying to come and go from this house that's getting snowed in. And there's still the snowed in quality throughout the mystery. It just doesn't like take place in one central location the way I personally would have really enjoyed it if it did. This is late in the series, but I think you can hop in with this one. I didn't have a problem figuring out what was going on in terms of some of the character stuff. I really liked the small town cozy bit of it, so this makes me more interested to try more from Anne Cleeves, you know, in this series or in whatever series. So yeah, I thought it was good. It didn't quite give me what I personally wanted, but it did have that little extra something to make it more than just okay to me. 24 is Well Played by Jen DeLuca, which is a follow-up to her book from last year, which was called Well Met, which was one of my very favorite contemporary romances of last year, which was basically a light hate to love, but set at a Ren Fair, which was just so geeky and fun. This one still is set around Ren Fair culture. I do think this one suffers in terms of the romance, which is why I gave it a 3.5 star instead of something higher, because I just felt like the character work was really good. Like the setup is our main female protagonist is Stacy. She's she always works at this Ren Fair that we encountered last year, and she's just sort of stuck in her life. And I thought that piece of the plot I thought was really well executed, or the character motivation. You really do get the sense of she's sort of in her 20s. She came back to the small town to help take care of her mom who was sick. Now her mom's better, and she hasn't really figured out how to restart what her life was going to be like. And so she's sort of having that like quarter life flailing, and she's been having this one night stand thing every summer with one of the guys in a band who tours the Ren Fair circuit called the Dueling Kilts, I think. And she starts texting him trying to get something more going over the course of a whole year. And you know from the back of the cover that she's not actually texting the guy she thinks she is. She's texting someone else like that is related to the band. And I just felt like the catfishing bit of that went on far too long in this book, and that just made the romance kind of hard to buy, I thought, even though I really liked all the characters involved and I thought the motivation on both sides of the catfishing made sense to me. It didn't quite get over the yard line in terms of really selling me that they could make the like I felt like the hero was basically too passive in a lot of ways, but somehow so was the heroine. Like they both seemed very kind of passive, and yet somehow they end up together. I don't know. Anyway, I think that the writing is nice. I'm excited to keep going in the series. I just think this was a little bit of a sophomore slump as compared with Well Met, which I just thought was really, really good last year. Okay, now we have a nice little run of them that I've already talked about. So 23 is A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Allain, which is a high fantasy romance. Yeah, high fantasy with just as much high fantasy as it is a romance, let's say. 22 is Golden in Death by J.D. Robb, which is the 50th book in the In Death series, which are near future romantic police procedurals. They're great. 21 is Death in the Family by Tessa Wiegert, which is a isolated closed circle mystery. 20 is Problem Child by Victoria Helen Stone, which is a literary take on a thriller, like a very character study heavy bit, but the character is a sociopath, and there's some thrilling elements, I guess. 19 is Headliners by Lucy Parker, which is a hate to love workplace romance. 18 is Come Tumbling Down by Shauna McGuire, which is a portal fantasy, 5th in a series. Don't start with this one. 17 is To Have and to Hoax by Martha Waters, which is a historical romance with a second chance in a marriage in peril kind of trope. 16 is Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Rye, which is a two cinnamon buns who've been hurt and broken finding each other contemporary romance. Number 15 is Sisters in Hate by Seward Darby, this is nonfiction. This is like reporting nonfiction, sort of like reportage, investigating or giving kind of case studies of 3 women who were radicalized to the alt-right and like what their motivations were in getting radicalized in the white nationalist movement here in the US. And this is just super interesting. It's very thought-provoking in terms of how women, and specifically white women, conceptualize their own kinds of power they have access to. Of these 3 women, one of them has sort of been de-radicalized, and I thought that was really interesting, hearing sort of the path she took in and out. The other 2 women, somewhat have the stories you would expect, but in some senses not. So I just think that overall this was a really interesting and thought-provoking piece of nonfiction that was really investigating a story within alt-right circles that we don't necessarily see as often as we see stories about men who are radicalized on the alt-right. Number 14 is The Night Swim by Meg Golden, and this is a small town thriller with a true crime podcast element to it. And it is a true crime podcast that is investigating a rape trial that is happening locally, and it is so good, but so dark and so hard to read because it's very well written. I would just tell people, I don't even really know what all to say about this one other than like read the back of the cover. Please know that the content warnings you would surmise from the back of that cover are a very big part of this book and what this book is about and doing, and just pick the right mood because it does get pretty dark, but it's very good, but very dark. And then 13 is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. This is a contemporary romance between 2 telenovela type stars that are going to be on a new show on a streaming service like Netflix. And I wouldn't call it hate to love, but it's like a workplace romance where they get off on the wrong foot. But what is so special about this one, I think, is all of the family dynamics in this are just so lovely. Like, I loved her families and like her relationship with her cousins, which is so great. And then he also has very strong connections to his family. Honestly, I would have liked this one even better if one of the main things keeping them apart wasn't like a big secret, and it's a version of a big secret that I personally don't really like. So I really enjoyed this and gave this 4 stars despite not liking a big part of one of the trope pieces of this, but it's really well done. I will definitely continue in the series if I think it's, it seems like it's gonna be in a series. So I will continue and thought this was very charming. Number 12 is Dragon Unleashed by Grace Draven, which is kind of similar to the Millavane one, as much an epic fantasy as it is a romance. Very cute. And then number 11 is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, which is sold as a thriller, but I think I've been on record saying that I think this is much better thought of as a horror novel. It's called a gentrification thriller. I think it's really more horror. It's very slow burn, it's very character driven, and I really enjoyed this and thought that the payoff at the end of this book makes that slow burn really worthwhile. I do think, just even looking at some of the early reviews, some people felt like, I think if you're expecting like a really action-packed thriller, you're not setting yourself up to enjoy this one. Expect a slow burn, expect a long ride, expect to spend time with characters that you like, who are interesting, who have complex motivations, different races moving into this neighborhood in Brooklyn. It reminds me a lot of Get Out. It's definitely got those kind of vibes, but basically like what if gentrification was a conspiracy, basically. So a different kind of conspiracy than it is. Anyway, I really enjoyed this one. I also learned a lot about the history of Brooklyn, which was fun. So this is number 11, and also Alyssa Cole, what a queen. Number 10 is A Touch of Stone and Snow by Mila Vane, and this is the second book in this series that we mentioned earlier, and this is a second chance romance. And guys, this one is I really like the romance in this one, even I think definitely more than the first one. Second chance romances are always a little bit of a hard sell for me. I'm kind of picky about how I like them, but this one totally worked because I bought why it didn't work out the first time and how they could still be really into each other despite that. that. Also, the hero slash both of them, but the hero has a pet snowcat, which is a saber-toothed tiger that they raise together and is like their baby. It's so sweet. And it's just, don't read this, like, I don't think these can be read as standalones, but this is the second entry in that series, actually really third, because there was a prequel novella. The world continues to develop and be interesting. The Destroyer is coming, and it's just good stuff. Number 9 is Say No More by Karen Rose, which is a romantic suspense. And again, this is the second book in a trilogy, I think, basically set in Sacramento within her bigger kind of world that has like 20 plus books in it. The trilogy in the specific city, I think, is what's gonna end up happening. But this is the second book. Like the one I just talked about, please don't read this one first. Go back and read Say You're Sorry, which is the first book. I did like Say You're Sorry a little bit better than this one, but I really enjoyed both. This is suspense that is set around different suspensey things that are happening because of a cult that is in the kind of Northern California area. And it's just super interesting, man. Like, it's a weird, these books are paced very oddly because there's a lot of action and then a lot of hanging out time, but I just get really swept up in the characters and in the world. A lot of content warnings on this one because the heroine is coming out of the cult, where as a child, she was a child bride and she was abused. So know that, but it's really good. Go back and read the first one and then read this one. And then number 8 is The Shadows by Alex North, which is is it paranormal kind of serial thriller book that I really enjoyed. I don't always love dual timelines in mysteries, but this one totally worked for me. I'm trying to figure out if the serial killer from the past is back and figure out if the serial killer in the past was somewhat supernatural. Like, that's the whole thing. Really, really good. And sorry for the change of perspectives, guys. The sun was creeping into my eyes, so I decided to change to the opposite side of the room. So we talked about The Shadows. Yeah, you guys know that I can be somewhat a hard sell on a dual timeline, but I thought this one really, really worked. And this was one where at several points in the story, I kind of had a, ooh, like, I didn't see that coming kind of a moment, which is just exciting in a thriller for me. So that is number 8. Number 7 is Something That May Shock and Discredit You by Daniel M. Lavery. Here, I think listed as Daniel Mallory Ortberg, but now goes by Daniel M. Lavery. And this is a memoir, like a spiritual and transgendered memoir, I guess might be the adjectives I would use to describe this one. Really good memoir, basically. And then the highest one of the new books entering this list, The Eighth Detective by Alex Pavasi. This book really surprised me. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I ended up loving this, but this is such a love letter to people who love classical mystery or classic whodunit kind of books. It just does that so well. And I just felt like this was kind of a slow burn in terms of really winning me over as it went along. I should mention that this is a set of 7 short stories that have a framing device, and I wasn't totally sold on the framing device at first, but as the book goes on, I just thought that got stronger and stronger, kind of as investigating different tropes in classical mystery. And the setup is basically, the framing device is that in the 1960s, this woman is an editor, and she's going to be publishing this set of 7 short stories that were sort of very obscure, and she goes to the reclusive author to kind of go over those stories and talk through why he wrote them the way that he did. And we find out like more about what's going on with him, what's going on with her, and each of the stories has their own specific flavor and specific trope combo it's dealing with. One of the short stories is one of my very favorite isolated closed circle mysteries I've ever read. I absolutely love that one. And all of the stories, I think, have something interesting about them. So, highest of my Q3 entries to the list. And like I said, first 4.5 star, one of my favorite books of the year, one of my favorite contemporary mysteries I've read in quite some time. And then rounding the bend to the top 5. So first we have Undercover Bromance by Alyssa K. Adams, which is a meta contemporary romance with romantic suspense kind of plot to it. Definitely content warnings for sexual assault, because that is what the romantic suspense bit is about. Number 4 is Network Effect by Martha Wells, which is the 5th in the Murderbot Diary series. And this is sci-fi, robot, adventure, fun. 3 is Beach Read by Emily Henry, which is contemporary romance, somewhat hate to love, 2 writers with writer's block, fallen in love. Number 2 is Alpha Night by Nalini Singh, and this is urban fantasy romance, a lot of political machinations. This is like number 19 in the series, so go back to the beginning because you won't understand the plot. if you don't start at the beginning. But this is so good. Number 2. And number 1 in terms of arcs that I received for 2020 releases so far is still Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. Contemporary romance, fake dating, friends to lovers, cinnamon roll hero, sassy heroine, just so good. Ugh, I love this book. Number 1 still. And yeah, I think that will do it for my forced ranked ratings of all of the arcs that I have received so far. As you can see, the vast majority of these I liked at least okay or pretty well. I would recommend pretty much all of these. I do have, let's say, maybe like the bottom 4 that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but the rest of them, I enjoyed all of them to varying degrees. If they sound good to you, I say go for it. And I appreciate the publishers who gave me the opportunity to read them early. I think that will do it for now. Definitely let me know if you enjoyed any of these or what you thought of any of these books down in the comments below. And yeah, I think that will do it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, along with a link to register to vote and some interesting things I'm listening to, watching, reading right now. And yeah, I think that will do it. Hope you are having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye.